Morning, guys. Welcome back to the channel. And if this is your first time here, I sure appreciate you stopping in this morning over some coffee talk here, if you will. We're going to touch on it's kind of became I don't want to say a hyped up slogan, but you hear it a lot, right? And I'm not the one that invented this, if you will, and I kind of have mixed emotions about it. I get questioned on this topic a lot throughout the year, and that question is the term that was coined by a gentleman in the industry, kind of labeling this the Doe Factory, right? So let's cover this, guys. And no holes poked in anybody. I think the gentleman, and you guys probably know who I'm talking about. Very respected gentleman, and has a big following, and as far as I know, does good work. So has a good company. So what I have with that, though, is, everybody has their own way of designing a property, let's say, or things that we focus on. And some folks that design properties, this isn't this gentleman's issue at all, but what happens is some folks only design, let's say, or work on certain or properties in certain areas. That gentleman, much like myself, travels the entire country. So in some places, right, so let's touch on that. In some places, you could say, a Doe factory is a problem. Other parts of the country, you could say, we want the does. So we're trying to build a Doe factory, if you will, right? So it's very specific. So I encourage you to fit this to where you're at in the region, in the Whitetails region, where you're at with the building process of your farm, and what your community holds as far as what are does doing to your now and future habitat, right? In other words, are they eating you out of house and home with your food plots, your crops, your browse, stuff like that, right? So let's touch on this one, guys. This is what I fear, right? I fear, one, that we don't need to blanket everyone, and I don't think this gentleman does this. I'm just saying I think this is how people interpret it, right? That people take it and they don't think outside the box. Sometimes it's easy to hear a slogan, and then without doing research, everyone just uses that slogan to, like I said, one hat fits all, and that's not the case. I don't think that's the case anyway. So let's touch on it, right? A Doe factory. One of the problems that I have, guys, on a property that let's just start here with a property with good deer numbers, right? To say that you don't want to plant summer food plots, you don't want to have any summer food on your property, and you don't want to build a Doe factory, there's a fine line there, right? This gentleman uses this topic a lot, this other slogan a lot. I've heard this, a lot of people using this across the country. And the other one is those that are here today are here to stay, right? Those that are here today are here to stay. But then on the other side, we talk about building a Doe factory. We don't want a Doe factory. But on the other hand, those that are here today are here to stay. So I encourage you to kind of open your mind a little bit about that, and kind of place yourself in that spectrum. And what I mean by that is, if it's true that those that are here today are here to stay, what you're asking for, unless you're in a property in a community that is the only one doing whitetail habitat, and you're the only one with food, which is kind of uncommon anymore, if you will. There are parts of the country with it, but it's kind of uncommon. If you're the only one in there, then there's a lot to be doing such stuff and improvements, focusing on browse, food plots, stuff like that. there's a lot probably to be said by, and this sounds horrible, but letting the deer eat your neighbor's ag fields and bean fields and alfalfa fields, and because it sounds horrible, but they have such a volume of it, right, guys, that you'll never compete with the let's just call it the summer food, the bulk of the summer food, and in your beans and alfalfa and corn. So I feel for the farmer on that, because what's sad about that is the deer do a lot of damage to their cash crop, if you will, right? So I fear that if you just one hat fits all, and we say don't build a Doe Factory, then what happens is, in that case, if you're the only one building it, right, then you probably have a good chance of drawing all those deer back to you and placing them where you need to place, so you don't they don't eat you out of house and home. They don't eat your 80 when he's got 400. The problem with that, guys, is most folks are in this kind of, not, I don't want to say competition, but it's a competitive, what would the term be, right? A competitive market when we're trying to harvest the best deer in the neighborhood. So a lot of folks are doing habitat improvements. A lot of folks are doing, maybe it's just logging or planting food plots or whatever, right? So what comes with that is, right, the guy that's doing the less pressure in the community is going to win if everybody's the same. But if your does, guys, are here today, are here to stay, and them does are on your neighbors, what if your neighbor has a bunch of food, and they did a bunch of timber work, and they had a bunch of habitat improvements done, because they're a hunting family and a farming family? You're in trouble, because they build a Doe Factory, and the does that were here today, are there to stay. So there's a fine line, right? I probably go on the other side of maybe it's because of where I'm from, and I'll be honest with that, right? Originally from there are a lot of parts of Michigan, guys, where you are trying to build a herd, right? So that's the opposite side of trying to not build a Doe Factory. There's parts of the country like Michigan, Central Michigan's got good deer numbers, but Northern Michigan, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, let's say, upstate New York, Pennsylvania, the list goes on, right? Where we're trying to build this deer herd. So if you don't try to build a deer herd, and you don't try to invite them to the plate when the rut comes, or the pre-rut comes, guys, you're asking a lot to house, keep, or attract bucks in general, but especially mature bucks, because at that time of the year, right, whoever has the does has a lot of power, right? So there's a fine line. What's the fine line? How do you determine if you need to build a herd, or you need to shun some of those does, or you need to maybe build as best habitat as you can, and then worry about knocking the deer numbers down as far as your doe numbers down in what we encourage, like the late season, right? So here's something I'm going to share with you. So kind of think about that, right? It's not a one hat fits all. Doe factories, you just don't want to get caught in the trap. And I'll touch on something here before we switch gears. You don't want to get caught in the trap of just thinking that, such and such said it's a Doe factory, I don't want any does on my property, because that's not true. But like I said, that's what people take of that term, right? So what you want to do, guys, is there's a lot to be said for, compartmentalizing, if you will, and putting as many does on a property, especially when we're talking smaller properties. You want to reach your carrying capacity. You don't want to go overboard, but you want to reach your carrying capacity. The sad part of this, guys, is I see a lot of folks that are saying, hey, we need to shoot does. We need to take these does early. We need to take these does late. We need to shoot does. And we don't want any does here because they're destroying our food plots. So the first question I always ask is this: what's your browse? Well, what do you mean? Well, what's your browse content? The reason they're eating your food plots out of house and home is probably because, like the state of Illinois, separate video, but I mean the state of Illinois, Iowa is another one where a lot of folks don't, timbering or logging is kind of a sin in certain parts of the country, and heaven forbid, you want to do any habitat work. What happens is that browse requirement's not being met. They are going to destroy your food plots. They're going to destroy your food plots. They're going to destroy the neighbor's ag. The list goes on and on, right? If you bump that browse up, you can also bump your carrying capacity. So browse not only helps the carrying capacity of food, but what it does, guys, is it also compartmentalizes and makes for a better hunt when you know where you're putting. We label it doe bedding, right? Within these first 100-yard rim of these food sources, we're putting them there for strategic reasons, right? So we can hunt the downwind side of them. We know where they're at. We're not, we're kind of opening the core. We're putting the does out towards the food. We're leaving a core so we have a potential for an opportunity for mature bucks in general, but to call home, right, on us or near us. So this is what I fear, right? So we're going to hook this whole chain together here. So this is what I fear. Folks want to, one, not have does because such and such said we don't want does. That's not the truth. You do want does, but you just don't want too many does, right? You don't want all the does. You want enough does. You want to reach your carrying capacity. So this is what I encourage you to do. It doesn't take very long, and there's a bunch of big names out here in the industry that'll say shoot your does and shoot them early, right? That's how you really put a dent in your doe herd. So guys, it's not a secret. I don't harvest does early. One, because of pressure. Because one, everybody else around you is doing it, right? So that creates pressure. Once you start that chain of pressure, you're not going to stop it. It's very obvious, even if you're not in a quote unquote high pressured state, it's going to be a situation where you're going to create pressure. And, so if you're going to do it, you have to do it in a spot where, like this weekend coming in, I've got the boys coming in. Maybe we'll shoot some does, but it's going to be in a spot where, kind of a early season spot where they're not going to run into the timber. If they're going to have to run 200-300 yards and to get into the core of the property, and they're on shot plots going out to big food plots, evening sit locations, something like that. We call them a doe burner stand, right? So I'm not saying you can't do it, but you got to really err on the side of caution. You go to get those does out of the timber. You got to get as close to them as you can as a side-by-side, leave the side-by-side running, leave the lights on, go track the doe, get her out of there, because you're creating a whole bunch of pressure, right? And don't let anybody tell you any different. So on the other side of that, what you need to focus on is, how do you know at that point, right? How do you know how many does to take? Because you can't use, so a couple things. You can't use last year's numbers, because deer populations could increase or decrease every year. It's proven by about 30 to 40%, right? Two or three fawns per doe. Last year's hunting season, mortality over the winters if you're up north, EHD, whatever that case is. So folks, don't take that into consideration, right? What is your carrying capacity? So then all of a sudden we're shooting does. We get to the pre-rut and rut. Oh crap, I don't have any does. Well, it's because you put way too much pressure, one. And yes, you can pressure does. And two, you knocked a hole in these no matter what, maybe larger acres, maybe every year you just need to shoot 10 does. But what I'm saying is the carrying capacity. So how do you know that? One, how you know that, guys, is not going to a tree stand on a food plot or over a feeder and saying, yep, I seen 10 does out here tonight. I need to shoot 10 does. The way you want to do that is you want to have, every time you get back to camp, early season, you want to sit down. If, let's say you've got yourself or you got 2 or 3 other hunters in camp, and put one's on the edge of a food source, one's in the timber, one's on water hole, whatever the case is, and you want to tally up all those does, right? And then you want to do another hunt. You want to tally up all those does. You want to carry that information, guys, until the end of the season. And then what you do is then you make a decision on how many does that you shoot, right? The reason for that is, guys, in the early season, right? You don't by saying we just need to shoot 10 does. Well, here's the problem. This is the example that I use. How do you know where those does came from? I mean, to me, the example I use, guys, is that's like going to Walmart and taking a county census, right? You have no idea where these people come from, these does came from. They could be, when we're talking about people at Walmart, right? You could have people there from 6 different counties that, yeah, there might be 1,000 people in there, but they might be from 6, 10, 12 different counties. They might have drove 2 hours from there. And if you disperse all those people back into their home, right? If we switch now to deer, their bedding areas, maybe they're not as overpopulated as you think they are. That's what I find, guys, and that's how I've done my doe management, my doe strategies over the years. Example is here on the home farm, right? We have more bucks than does. Kentucky as a whole, because of the 1 buck state, has way more bucks than does. There might be some spots in like the southeast part of the state, northeast part of the state where that's not the case, but most of the case, and that kind of attaches to a lot of 1 buck states, there's way more bucks than there is does. So, right, it's hard to knock a hole in your population if you only have 1 tag. As a landowner, we only get 1 tag. So like this year, I harvested cheeks early, and there's no management tag or nothing like that to go. I wish I had one, because I've got multiple deer that are over their maturity, and hopefully the boys this weekend are going to help me poke a hole in those. But they need to go, to make room for these really nice younger deer. But you can't do that a lot. You have to really understand how you have to do that. We'd like to take a minute to thank our great partners: Promise Land Tree Service, Scent Thief, Painted Arrow Outdoors, C6 Land Clearing, Wicked Feeder Solutions, Bluebird Drones, DLS Outdoors, Jackhammer Mineral, Full Spectrum Products, Harper Growing Solutions, and Cabela's. So you're kind of handcuffed, if you will. So back to the does, right? So I encourage guys, don't do that. Run. It's not worth the pressure, and you don't know. You don't know what numbers you need to take yet, right? Just because you're going to a food plot, like I said here on the farm, I'll finish that, is last year was the first time I shot does. I shot 2 does off from the farm, and I could have shot 2 or 3 more. Just, didn't, because there wasn't anybody here to hunt, and I was, getting busy. But I didn't need, 10 does just because. So one thing to think of, right? Going back to what we said before, just because my 72 doesn't need any does shot doesn't mean that the 400-acre dairy farm down the road needs them, or vice versa. Just because they've got 100 deer and they need to shoot a bunch of does. But like I said, are them does there early season? Are they there after you take the ag away? Are they there after you take that last cutting of alfalfa? Is there really that much doe pressure? In some cases they are. I'm not saying Central Michigan's if you're around the Edmore area or something like that, right, where it's crazy, way too many deer, right? Those deer never leave, right? There was way too many does in August, and there sure is in the world way too many does in November. So you need to shoot a bunch of does. Most areas, most properties there, but that's not the case if you go an hour from there, up where like I'm originally from in Reed City, and then we were from Lake County, right, between Reed City and Baldwin, if you will. That's not the case usually, right? Very, very rarely. It takes some excellent habitat or big food sources on some properties to have a doe problem. And the reason for them is it's timber country, right? These deer roam, and all of a sudden, do you need to shoot does? Do you not? And you get caught in this trap of just saying, I need to kill a bunch of does, and guess what? You're left without any attractant come fall. This is the last example we use, right? I'm full of these analogies, especially when I'm drinking coffee. But what happens is, guys, right? That's like saying, okay, we're going to put all the work into the farm. We're going to plant the most beautiful food plots. Boy, we're going to get timely rains. It can be great. And the pre-rut comes, and I'm going to take herbicide and spray it all away. Why would you do that? That's the same thing with those, right? You have to have them there because they're just, if not more of a draw than that food plot, right? Because when the mentality switches here in about 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to wish that you had those does, because whoever has the browse, whoever has the food plots left, is going to have the does, and those bucks are going to frequent them areas the most, right? So I'm not saying you can't have too many does. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of truth to having a Doe Factory, because it is, but it's not a one hat fits all. Everybody don't do that. Because what happens is, guys, right, you're not, to me, why I do summer food plots, right, is I'm amending the soil. They don't need the food plots at that time, guys, but I need that soil to be healthy, because when I plant my fall food plots here, like in September, if you don't do summer food plots, or you don't do cover crops, or you don't have something on that soil, and you're not amending soil, good luck trying to grow a great and healthy food plot come fall. Don't blame the food plot seed. Don't blame the dealer you bought it from. Don't blame. If you're not amending the soil and giving that soil, building soil, that dirt, if you will, making it soil in the summer. That's why we build that. I'm not trying to make a Doe Factory, right? I'm trying to amend my soil. And I think this gentleman that I speak of here, like I said, guys, I think the mindset maybe there has changed a little bit. That gentleman now owns a seed company, and they do a lot of summer food plots. So, but like I said, they and many other folks that are in this industry understand that, yes, you have to have does, but you have to understand what a Doe Factory is, what your carrying capacity is, and what do you do after you reach capacity. You harvest them late season. You don't harvest them early season, because you don't have the proper, you just don't have the numbers right? You don't have, you can't take, like I said last year, so repeating myself here, but you can't take last year's numbers. You can't take, just going to a food plot and seeing, 30 deer there, because where'd they come from? So I encourage you to really take a stand, take a collection of stand hunts. Maybe if you're just a lone soldier hunting your farm, then maybe you take a month worth of inventory, and or 3 months worth of inventory, and when that last month of season comes, and then you decide, do I need to shoot does, do I not, right? And then you got to do that same thing next year. That's my take on it, right, guys? Just don't get caught in the trap of a one hat fits all approach all the time. And I just think that folks aren't understanding the full meaning behind that term, Doe Factory, right? So make sure you got enough of these does going into the pre-rut and rut. You're not overrun with them, but make sure you got enough of them. If you don't, if you think they're scattered all over the farm and they're hard to read and you don't know where they're bedding, guess what? That's how you build a chore list for the upcoming habitat season. What you need to do, where you need to do it, it all stems from understanding your does, where they're at, and what they're telling you. It will make or break next year's season. Thanks, guys.